Good morning. I see that you guys are getting ready and I see yoga blocks. So awesome. We are going to be using 2 blocks in our practice. If you don't have blocks, then a couple of stacks of sturdy books could work just fine. We will be starting on our backs, but have your blocks nearby because we'll use them shortly. And once you have everything you need, you can come to lie on your back with your knees bent and feet to the floor. Once you come to lie on your back, knees bent, feet to the floor, just take a brief scan of your body, noticing which parts of your body are actually touching the floor and which parts are not. So the back of your head is likely touching the floor, bottoms of your feet, back of your pelvis, maybe some points along your back, maybe some points along your back are not touching the floor. Bring your attention to your upper back, specifically your shoulder blades. And a little bit above the shoulder blades, you have the tops of your shoulders, but if you reached beyond there towards your upper back, there's some muscular tissue just above your shoulder blades. And I want you to let that tissue soften, let the tops of your shoulders soften, and see if you can glue your entire shoulder blade down to the floor without tensing up again in the tops of your shoulders. So both shoulder blades, as best you can, in full contact with the floor beneath you. And you might notice that shifted or changed the points of contact elsewhere in your body. And if not, totally fine. So we're going to keep working our way down, keeping the shoulder blades in contact with the floor. We're going to move down to the back of the rib cage, all the way down to those bottommost ribs. We want to keep them in contact with the floor. We're going to be using the floor as feedback. So make sure you can feel the floor touching those ribs. And then all the way down to your pelvis. Back of the hips should be touching the floor evenly. So right and left side are just as heavy as the other. And then notice your feet. The bottoms of your heels are touching the floor. And so are the bottoms of your pinky toes and big toes. And we're going to keep that sense of weightiness through the feet and through your back body. And then from there, I want you to energetically push through your heels just until your tailbone only lifts up off the floor, only the tailbone. And from there, we're going to start to round into our back body one vertebrae at a time. So I want you to take your tailbone and tip it towards the backs of your knees. And you might notice that your sacrum came with it. Totally fine. Sacrum might be lifting off the floor here. Everything else is still heavy. I want you to start to squeeze your glutes, and we're going to continue this same action of this rounding towards the backs of the knees. And now you're going to lift the back of your waist, but your rib cage is still on the floor. And now we're going to lift the lowest ribs, but your upper ribs and shoulder blades are still on the floor. And now we're going to lift those upper ribs and leave the top of the shoulder blades still on the floor, with everything else scooping towards the backs of your knees. Now bring your hands to your front body. There should be a subtle depression in your hip creases where your hip flexors are. They should not be bulging up to the ceiling. And if they are, back out a little bit and see if you can soften into that space. And same thing with the lowest ribs in the front of your rib cage. They should not be popping up towards the ceiling. We want them softening down towards the floor. So glutes might be getting a little bit of heat here. We're going to keep all of this and we're going to reverse it. So I want you to keep the engagement of your glutes, and all we're going to do is lower those ribs just beneath the shoulder blades down. So the ribs in the front of your rib cage are also melting down. And now we're going to lower the back of the waist, and then the back of the hips, and the sacrum, and the tailbone is the last thing to come down, and then we can let go of the glutes. So that's how it's going to go. And we're going to do this 4 more times. We're going to go slow, not quite as slow as we did this first round, now that you know what to expect. So feet stay firmly planted all the while. First, we're just going to shift the tailbone and start to squeeze those glutes. Everything shifting towards the backs of the knees. And then we're going to lift the back of the hips, back of the waist, lowest ribs, upper ribs, maybe only the bottom tips of the shoulder blades, and we're going to hold there. We're still rounding towards the back of the knees, and we'll start to come down in the opposite. So we'll lower the shoulder blades, back of the rib cage, keep those glutes engaged, lower the back of the waist, back of the hips, sacrum and tailbone, and then you can completely let go of that contraction in your glutes so that we can start fresh each round. So 3 more like that. You can start moving at your own pace. If this is too fast for you, you're welcome to hold it at the top of your bridge longer if you prefer. I definitely want you to try to hold it for at least 2 or 3 breaths there at the top. And then remind yourself to keep that action even as you start to round back down to the floor. And we may have 2 more depending on your pace. You can periodically check in with your front body, those lowest ribs and hip flexors. It's not about getting super back bendy or thrusting your hips up really high to the ceiling. This is about control and really connecting mind to body movement. One last round. When your hips and your tailbone come back down to the floor, relax that contraction of your glutes. You may want to windshield wipe your knees from side to side a couple of times, just to reset. And we're going to take this mind-body connection into the hamstrings. Your feet will stay planted to the floor just like they are. We're going to keep back body heavy to the floor, just like it was with the bridges. But this time, we're going to really focus on keeping those hip flexors soft. There will be a subtle shift of your sacrum and tailbone towards the backs of your knees, but we're not lifting up into a bridge. Instead, we're going to find that shift. And then I want you to see if you can squeeze the backs of your thighs, your hamstrings only, without bringing the glutes on board. Now, you may feel this into your butt cheeks a little bit because your hamstrings attach on the round bones that are on your pelvis in your butt cheeks, but it's not going to be a full glute contraction. You can find this contraction of your hamstrings by pushing down through your feet, but also energetically hugging your feet towards your upper body. And we're just going to take an isometric hold here. If those hip flexors are tensing up, if you can feel the muscle contracting there, then more of that posterior tilt. more tilt of sacrum and tailbone towards backs of the knees. We'll hold here for 3, 2, and on 1, lower down, completely relax all that muscular contraction. And we're going to do this again a couple more times. We're going to progressively make it a little more challenging, but we're also trying to get into the full length of those muscles in the backs of your thighs. So from where the hamstrings attach to the muscles, or the bones in your butt, all the way down to where they attach to the bones in the back of your knee. So we're going to walk our feet forward, maybe 4 to 6 inches at most. Soles of the feet should still be firm, the base of the big toe, pinky toe, and heel. You might feel your inner arches engaging a little bit here, and that's fine. And we're going to find that same action. So back body heavy, but we're going to shift the pelvis just subtly towards the backs of the knees. You might already feel those hamstrings. And we're going to give a contraction of the hamstrings by pulling the heels back towards the upper body. If you feel that your hips have slightly lifted away from the floor, that's fine, but that's not the goal here. We're not trying to lift up into a bridge. And we're just going to hold here for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and on 1, lower down, completely releasing that contraction. And we're going to walk our feet forward another 4 to 6 inches. Soles of the feet should still be down. There should still be some bend in the back of your knees. Same thing. Find that pelvic shift, soft with the hip flexors. Energetically hug heels towards your upper body. Feel those hamstrings, I hope. And we'll hold here. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and on 1, relax your efforts. And we're going to walk the feet forward one last time. This will be your edge. So as far as you can get them forward while still keeping big toe, pinky toe, and heel down. You might feel those inner arches. You might also feel your calf muscles engage. And your calf muscles also attach at the knee. So it's all connected. Same thing here. We're going to find the pelvic shift, hug the heels towards the upper body, and hold here. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and lower down. Walk your feet back in towards your hips, towards your butt. Woo! If your hamstrings were cramping, that is common. That just means the muscles are freaking out because we're doing something that's new to them altogether, or something that they haven't been doing for a long time. So we're just retraining those muscles to activate, reigniting that connection between the brain and specific muscle groups in our bodies. Then we're going to take that concept and focus on our lower belly. So the back body is still going to be heavy on the floor. I want you to use the floor as feedback. So make sure you can feel it with your shoulder blades, as well as those bottommost ribs in the back of your rib cage. And we're going to find that pelvic shift. So tilting the tailbone towards the backs of the knees, but you can keep your glutes and hamstrings soft here. And now I want you to really hug your hip bones and lowest ribs closer together so that the muscles in your lower belly start to firm up. But I want you to see if you can keep your upper belly relatively soft, relaxed here. So we're really trying to hone in on the space from the belly button to the muscles in the front of your hips and those bony hip points. So hugging hip bones close to ribs, firm in the lower belly. We're just going to pick up the right foot and then set it down. And pick up the left foot and set it down. We'll do that a few more times. I want you to see if you can keep everything else solid, really still, nothing moving. If you're like me, it's really hard to do. Your pelvis may want to wiggle from side to side. Maybe the back of your ribs on one side or the other are lifting away from the floor. As best we can, we're just going to anchor down using the floor as feedback. Soft in the upper belly, but firm in the lower belly. Lift a foot, pause there, and now lift the other foot. So we have both feet lifted. Reconnect with the floor beneath you. Use that as feedback. Keep those lowest ribs down. And then we're going to march in reverse. So we're just going to tap the right foot down and then bring it back to starting point. And same thing with the left foot. Tap it down and back to starting point. And we're going to continue marching like that at our own pace. Slower is better. And I want you to try to hug your hip bones close to your ribs without gripping your upper belly. We're going to be using the floor as feedback, so make sure those lowest ribs in the back stay down. Now you can tap the foot straight down to the floor, or you can reach the foot a little further out. That will be more challenging. Use the feedback from the floor and your body to determine what's best for you. So in theory, nothing is moving except this motion of tapping the foot down. Lower back is not hinging. Hips are not wagging from side to side. Your thigh bone is moving in the hip joint where it connects there into the socket. But the control is coming from the lower belly, not from your jaw, not from tops of the shoulders, not even from the muscles at the back of your rib cage. Let's go 3 more per side. Continue hugging those hip bones closer to ribs. So it's a posterior tilt, even though the spine is relatively flat here. Last round. When you finish your last round, we're going to keep that control, set both feet to the floor, and relax our efforts a little bit. Lift your hips up and over to the right, and take your knees over to the left. You can place your left hand on top of your right outer knee. Thighs should be pretty close to your upper body. And then we're going to breathe into the back of the ribs on the right side. So breathe into the back of your right waistline and lowest ribs, maybe even placing a hand there for feedback. Just a few breaths here. And then we'll take that same twist on the second side. So find your center, lift your hips up and over to the left a few inches, take your knees across to the right, placing your right hand on top of your left outer knee, and we'll be breathing into the back of the left waist and left ribs. We'll be coming all the way onto our right side, finding a fetal position. So we can use the strength of the left hand and arm to press up off of the floor. And we're going to transition to a tabletop position. We'll be using our blocks. So if you don't have blocks, then you can use sturdy stacks of books. You're going to be placing the blocks flat, and they'll be turned at about a 45-degree angle towards the upper corners of your yoga mat, if you're using a yoga mat. If not, just put those blocks at a slight angle. And then we're bringing our palms to the blocks. So once you find that, your hands will also be turned out at a slight angle. So we're going to take some of those same principles And to practice, this time we're facing the floor on hands and knees instead of being on our backs with our feet up off of the floor. So it's that posterior tilt, hugging hip bones closer to ribs, but trying to stay soft, not gripping in the upper belly. It's going to be the concept of moving one part of the body without moving everything else, right? So we're going to try to really stay stable and hone in on some of those muscle groups, brain to body connections. So you can give a little squeeze to your blocks, make sure that you have a firm foundation there. And tops of both feet are going to be flat to the floor for today. And we'll start just by checking in with the upper body. So push through your hands, and I want you to rotate your arm bones right and left or forward and back. Just notice how you can rotate them. And I want you to rotate them so that your biceps are facing forward. So veiny part of the elbow facing forward. And we're going to keep that orientation for these next several sequences. And then from there, find that engagement in your lower belly. And we're just going to hug the left heel towards the left butt cheek with the toes pointed. So all we're doing is lifting the foot and trying to hug the foot towards the butt. And you might feel the arches of your feet. You might feel those hamstrings. And now we're just going to hover the left knee off of the floor. So we're just lifting the left knee. When we do that, we're going to try not to get all wonky in the hips or shoulders. Just lift the knee. And then we're going to take the left knee to the left inner wrist or lower arm and see if we can make contact there. And we're going to keep hugging the foot towards the butt. And don't let the knee touch the floor. We're going to sweep it slowly straight back. Nothing else moves. Now we're going to point the toes up towards the ceiling. Reach, reach, reach without arching into the lower back. And we're going to do that 4 more times, nice and slow. So we're going to sweep that knee slowly forward. Try not to touch the floor. And bring it to the left inner wrist or lower arm or elbow. And then we're going to slowly bring it back. And reach for the sky without compromising in your lower back. Nothing else moves. 3 more like that, moving at your own pace. All the while trying to hug the left heel towards the left butt cheek. One more round here. And we're going to hold here with the toes, reaching for the ceiling. Keep hugging your heel towards your butt. And I want you to lift as high as you can without arching into your back. If you're like me, it's a very small lift. Holding here, 5, 4, 3, 2, and on 1, we're going to set that knee down, tuck the toes under for a break, and you can sit back onto your heels just for a moment or so. And as always, just a reminder, if you have any questions or concerns, you can unmute yourself and we'll address them and move back into our practice. And you're probably hoping to get out of that position now, so we're going to shift forward. Flatten the tops of the feet once more. And we're going to do that same thing on the second side. So we'll start just by pointing the right toes and hugging the heel towards the bum, towards the butt cheek. And then we're just going to hover the right knee off the floor and draw it forward towards the right inner wrist or inner forearm. And then we're going to slowly start to take that knee back, reaching up to the tips of the toes without arching into the lower spine. And we'll do 4 more like that at our own pace. Try not to touch the floor as you move through your transitions. You might notice hamstrings and glutes are now working in a partnership, right? They're firing together here. The next time those right toes are reaching for the ceiling, I want you to pause there. Keep hugging your hip bones close to your ribs and reach, 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 lifting those toes up towards the ceiling. Woo, great glutes, my goodness. Hold 5, 4, 3, 2, and on 1. Bring that knee back down to meet the left. Relax your toes. You can tuck them under if you like. We're actually going to turn our fingertips down. So fingertips are going to go down the edges of your blocks, and you're going to shift your weight forward into the heels of your hands. If your blocks are too lightweight, you can do this on the floor as well. Just forward and back. This is a very gentle stretch for the palm side of your hand and wrist. If you want to take it into something a little more intense, you can bring your palms flat to the floor and shift back, letting the wrists peel away, but keeping the pads of your fingers and thumbs down. And we'll bring hands back to the blocks and reset. So we're going to take our second set, similar actions, different motions. You'll be hugging your heel towards your butt. You're going to hover that knee off the floor. And then we're just going to take the left knee out to the side, externally rotating. So it's like a dog who's going to the bathroom, right? Pretend there's a fire hydrant there. And then you're going to tap your knee forward to your outer arm or wrist. And then bring it back to starting point and tap the left knee in to meet the right. And we'll do that 4 more times. So externally rotate, hips stay stable, and then bring it forward and back to starting point. Left knee comes in to tap the right. 3 more like that. Two more. Last one here. Pause here before we go to the second side. You can sit back on your heels for a rest. So things that can feel unpleasant with that one, maybe a little cramping in those outer hip flexor muscles, just like with the hamstrings. It's just your muscles freaking out, right? They're not used to moving in that way, and it's common, and it does get better over time. Something else that can happen would be a clicking sensation in the hip joint. I find that if I'm not hugging my hip bones close enough to my ribs, finding a little bit of that posterior tilt, if I don't have enough of that action, I get the clicking. So you can try that if that's happening for you, really tapping into that action of hip bones hugging closer to ribs. So let's come in to the second side, same thing. We're gonna lift that foot up off the floor and then lift the right knee up off the floor. We're just gonna take the knee out to the side and then bring it forward to that outer right arm. And then take it back and bring the right knee in to the left. Same thing 4 more times. Trying not to let the knee or foot come down to the floor. Two more. Last one here. And you can walk back off of your blocks if you're using blocks or books. And we're gonna take the backs of our hands, make little fists, take the backs of the hands and forearms down to the floor. I want you to keep pushing the backs of your hands and wrists down and start to lift your elbows any amount. Getting a lengthening, a stretch in the backs of the hands and wrists here. Couple more breaths. And we'll release out of that, reset hands to the blocks. We have one more set, and we're gonna be combining all of these actions with some leg extension. So I'll show you how it's going to look. You're going to externally rotate, just like we did a moment ago, taking this left knee out to the side, and then without arching into the lower back or sinking into the shoulders, you're gonna real slow start to reach those left toes back in line with the right foot and tap them down either to the back of your mat or to the floor behind you. So here's how it should not look. I know this is a dramatization, but sometimes we're doing things that we don't realize we're doing. So we want to try to keep everything really still. We're going to externally rotate and we're going to slowly reach back, moving from that connection where the glutes become the hamstrings or hamstrings become the glutes. Tap the foot down, lift the foot, draw it back to starting point, take the left knee in to meet the right. And we'll do that 4 more times or for a total of 5 if you're already working on it. Going nice and slow. We want a real controlled touchdown when you tap that foot down to the floor behind you. And we're going to go right into the second side. Same thing here, externally rotating, slowly reaching back, a controlled touchdown with those right toes, and then we lift them back away from the floor, draw the knee forward, and bring it in to meet the left. 4 more like that. Last one. And right knee comes down to meet the left. And we're going to set our blocks to the side. They'll be there for you if you need to use them in your lunge poses. Bringing hands down to the floor. Same angle, same orientation in the hands and arms. So biceps rotating forward. I want you to tuck your toes under. We're going to come into a relatively short downward facing dog and keep a bend in the knees. So you can press your arms towards straight, but keep a nice bend in your knees. And we're going to focus on that isolation again. So think about a little back bend in your upper back, but a little bit of that posterior tilt in your lower spine. So hugging hip bones closer to ribs. And I want you to reach out through your armpits, reach out through the pinky fingers, firm through your hands, long arms, biceps rotating towards the ceiling. We're going to keep all this and add on a little bit more. I want you just to pivot on the balls of your feet and take your heels to the right and see if you can really work that hip bone to ribs action, especially on the left side. Breathe into the back of your left ribs and left waist. Right hand is heavy here. Come back to center to reset, and we'll do same thing second side. So heels to the left, left hand is heavy. Really hug that right hip bone closer to the right ribs. Breathe into that space. Come back to center to reset. Walk your feet back just 2 or 3 inches, a more traditional downward facing dog length. We're going to keep a little bend in the knees and really lengthen through the arms and spine here. I want you to keep your biceps facing forward and hug your shoulder blades down your back, using the muscles in your armpit, not the tops of your shoulders. Keep all of that and slowly start to shift forward to a bent knee plank pose. A little bend in the knees. Hip bones hugging close to ribs. We're going to hold here, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. With control, we're going to press through the hands, pushing forward to come back to downward facing dog. And then you'll walk your knees, or I'm sorry, your feet back just 2 or 3 inches more. A little bit longer dog here. Same thing. Keep a micro bend in the knees. Biceps forward. And come forward to your plank pose. And this time we're going to bend the elbows just 2 or 3 inches. And push the floor away to re-straighten. 2 more like that. Just 2 or 3 inches. Push the floor to re-straighten. Last one. Just 2 or 3 inches. Push the floor to re-straighten. Bring your knees down. And we're going to walk the hands forward and let the hips shift back in line with the knees, coming into a puppy dog pose. Your head can come in line with your upper arms, or you can rest your forehead to the floor. Biceps are still wrapping forward or towards the ceiling. And from your puppy dog pose, you can bend your arms and let your upper body and hips come down to the floor, so you're on your belly. Go ahead and bring your forehead to the floor and take your arms into a soft cactus position, whatever is comfortable for you there. And bring your attention to your pelvis and your lower back. I want you to find that hip bones to ribs action. So you might feel that your lowest belly, the space between your hip bones, might soften away from the floor just a bit here, and just slightly less curve in your lower back. And then I want you to squeeze your glutes and your hamstrings. We're going to anchor all the way down to the feet, reach out through the toes. Push forward through your hands and come into a Cobra Pose. So we're really strong here from glutes down, and we're pressing through the hands to come into a small extension in the upper spine. And then with control, we're going to lower back down. So your hands can be nice and wide. They'll be forward of your shoulders. I want it to feel good for you. So if it doesn't, you can always unmute and we'll address it. So again, posterior tilt, engage those glutes, push through the hands. Find that supported or assisted Cobra Pose. When you come in your Cobra, I want you to really work that hip bones to ribs action. In fact, think about lifting your lower belly away from the floor towards your spine. It's a lift, not a suck. And then we'll come down. And we're going to do it one more time. Reset. Press through the hands. Cobra Pose. And go ahead and come back down.
turn your head onto your right side of your face and just hug your left knee into a bend. If this is not comfortable, you can always come up to sit. Our focus here is not really the lower body. We're going to get into our shoulders and arms a little bit. So just take your left fingertips to the floor with a little bend in your left elbow. And I want you to internally rotate your left arm. You can lift your fingertips off the floor. Internal rotation. And now see if you can externally rotate. Now, if you're like me, go ahead and set the arm down. You initiated that movement from your hand, and maybe you didn't even realize it. We're going to try to initiate it from the shoulder joint and not the hand. So you can keep it bend the elbow, cover the arm above the floor. We're going to start with external rotation. I want you to use the muscles at the base and outer armpit and hug that left arm and rotate so that the biceps start to turn forward and the palm of your left hand starts to turn forward. And then we're going to keep that hug of the armpit muscles as we take it in the opposite direction. So the left upper arm bone is rotating in the shoulder socket, kind of like a sausage on a stick. Nice and slow. We'll take it in both directions. One more time. And I want you to take it into that external rotation. So rotating it back and hold there. Just a couple of breaths. And then you can set that arm down, re-straighten your left knee, or if you're seated, we're just going to shift into the second side. If you're on your belly, you can bend your right knee. You can keep a little bend in your right arm. And now we know we need to be moving from the shoulder, not the hand. So I want you to find that external rotation, moving from the muscles that support your shoulder blade. So outer armpit, hugging that right arm bone into an external rotation, bicep and palm facing forward. And then see if you can keep the hug and find a little internal rotation. Range of motion probably won't be as far here. And we'll do it a couple more times. If you're feeling this in your lower ribs, in the back of your rib cage, or muscles in the back of your waist, that is a sign that you're compensating and trying to cheat it. So see if you can really just move from the armpit and not further down the back. Hold that external rotation. And then we'll set it down. We're going to be coming into a downward facing dog. So you can reset to hands and knees. Find your downward facing dog. You're welcome to keep a bend in your knees like we did in the previous rounds. Biceps facing forward. Simply hug your right heel towards your butt, point your toes. Just like we did from tabletop, we're going to start to lift the toes towards the ceiling. Nothing else moves. We're going to lift until we can't lift anymore. And then we're going to start to draw it forward. Once your right thigh passes your left thigh, you can shift forward and bring that right foot down. You're going to lower your left knee down to the floor for a low lunge. Bring your right hand inside your right foot, and we're going to open up for a modified side angle pose. I cannot believe what time it is, guys. Just look at the clock. Namaste. We're gonna move along. So right arm is inside your right leg. I want you to take your left hand to the top of your left shoulder. Hold on to it. And then I want you to reach your left elbow towards the ceiling and lift and reach from your outer left armpit. Reach, reach, reach. Hold that. We'll come back to that. Hip bones and ribs closer together. So nice and full in the back of your left waist. Now keep that reach in the armpit and simply straighten your arm. Couple breaths here. Rebend the elbow. Keep the reach in the armpit. And re-straighten the arm. Keep the reach in the armpit. And bring the left hand down. Square everything up. Downward facing dog. Pick up your left foot, hug your heel towards your butt with your toes pointed. And we're going to slowly start to lift those toes towards the ceiling. Nothing else moves. And then we'll slowly start to bring the thigh forward and then shift forward, coming into our low lunge, right knee down, left foot forward. Swing those left toes behind you. Left arm comes inside the left leg. And we're going to open up, staying nice and full in the back of the right waist and ribs. You can bring your right hand to the top of your right shoulder and then just lift your elbow and start to really lift from that outer right armpit. Reach from the armpit. Keep that reach. Straighten your right arm. Keep the reach. Rebend the right arm. Keep the reach. Re-straighten the right arm. And bring right hand down to the floor. Square everything up. Downward facing dog. From your down dog, pick your right foot up off the floor, point your toes, start to reach your toes for the ceiling. Same thing again, we're gonna bring the thigh forward, bring the right foot down. This time, the left knee will be bent, but off the floor. And we're gonna rise upright for a relatively short crescent lunge or a split leg stance. So left knee is off the floor. Take both hands to the tops of your shoulders. Elbows should be hugging in close to each other and not out wide. We're going to try to keep the elbows in and point the elbows up towards the ceiling. So what can happen when we do that? Compensation. Ribs can pop forward. We can crease into the space beneath the lowest ribs in the back. So I want you to be mindful of that. We're going to keep the hands to the shoulder blades here. And I want you to round into your lower and mid back. And then find a little baby back bend, curling into your upper back only. And round. And extend. One more like that. Round. Extend. Come to the neutral spine, somewhere in the middle. We're going to take right hand behind the back. The back of your hand will sit just above your sacrum or tailbone area. It's an internal rotation, but we want to keep strong in the muscles in the base of the left armpit. And then we're just going to straighten the left arm and lower the left knee all the way down to the floor. So we're in a low lunge. You can keep those toes tucked under or flatten the foot, hugging hip bones to ribs. We're going to take a little side bend to the right. Reach to that left armpit. Come back to center. You can bring your left hand down, your right hand down. Do tuck your left toes under once more. We're coming into a full side angle pose. You're welcome to grab one of your blocks or a stack of books and rest your hand to that. Or you can just bring the right arm inside the right leg like we did with the version with the left knee down. Heavy through your right heel. So even weight distribution for that foot. And then hip bones and ribs closer together. Left hand to the top of the shoulder. First, reach through your armpit and extend that elbow up. Keep reaching to the armpit. And then straighten your arm. Rebend the elbow, taking the hand back down to the shoulder. And then you can take your hand to your left hip or waist. We're going to straighten the right leg, coming into Trikonasana triangle pose. Just a few breaths here. Get acquainted with that left outer armpit again. Keep that engagement as you extend the left arm straight up. Left hand back to the hip. You can rebend your right knee for the transition. Both hands to the floor. We're going to square everything up to bring that left knee down, and the top of the foot comes back down to the floor. You're going to shift your weight back so that you can place your right shin to the floor at an angle. Mine's at about a 45-degree angle. I'm sitting on my left heel. We're just taking a little stretch break. And then you can stay upright, or you can take your hands forward and bow forward towards that right foot. Pushing through your left foot to come off of the left shin. We'll bring the right foot forward again, tucking the left toes under, hovering the left knee. We're going to come back into that split stance lunge, that crescent lunge. Heavy through your right heel. We're going to take our arms into cactus. So outer armpits are engaging to hold the shoulder blades stable and keep those upper arm bones from coming out of the socket. You're going to push through your right foot and step your left foot forward. So we're coming into a little fierce pose squat. Are we compensating in the lower back or ribs? Or are we holding everything nice and concise there? From here, I want you to just start to rotate those upper arm bones in the socket, both at the same time, until your fingertips start to point down any amount. And we'll hold here, 5, 4, 3, 2, and on 1, we're gonna slowly re-rotate back into our cactus arms, extend up through all 10 fingertips, and touch all 10 fingertips to the floor. Step it back to plank pose. We're gonna move through Chaturanga, coming all the way down. Flatten the tops of the feet. You can keep your hands where they are or move them forward. We're coming into a Cobra Pose. Make sure you anchor from glutes down through hamstrings, posterior tilt. And we'll be leaning back in downward facing dog. And we're going to take that same sequence, initiating it from the second side. So left foot lifts. You can point your toes and start to extend the left toes up towards the ceiling. And then we'll be bringing the left thigh forward, stepping the left foot down for that crescent lunge. We'll bend in the right knee, but it's off the floor. Hands are going to come to the tops of the shoulders, and then we lift the elbows without jutting forward through the lower ribs. I want you to round into your spine and extend your upper spine. Slow and steady, 2 more like that. Coming to neutral, you can take your left hand behind your back, the back of your hand towards your backside. Reach up to your right armpit and straighten your right arm. We'll be lowering the right knee down to the floor for a low lunge, little side bend to the left.
Coming back to center, both hands can come down to the floor to set up for side angle pose. So with your right toes tucked under, you can lift the knee and spin the heel down. Left arm will come inside the left leg. Hand can be dangling or to a prop. And then your right hand will come to the top of your shoulder. You're gonna reach to your armpit and elbow. Keep reaching to the armpit, straighten the right arm. Rebend that right elbow, and then shift the hand down to the waistline or hip. You can straighten that left leg. We're setting up for our triangle pose. Hand can stay where it is, or extend the right arm up. Rebending the left knee for the transition. Both hands come to the floor. We're going to square up to bring the right knee down to the floor and top of the foot to the floor as well. You'll shift your weight back to sit on your right heel and place your left shin to the floor in front of you using your hands for support.
Hey, Carrie.
There's a nice bend in the left knee here. My shin's at about a 45-degree angle. You can stay where you are, or you can bow forward any amount.
Hey, Carrie.
Breathing into that outer left hip.
Hey, Carrie.
Yes.
How do we get more space in that? Because I can get nowhere near that position.
Oh, that's fine.
Should I sit
So
on a couple blocks or?
it might just be your anatomical reality. So meaning, do you want to bow forward more? Are you feeling a positive sensation in this area?
Well, the thing is, like, if I bend my leg, this is like as far as I can come down.
Let me get closer. The squares are small. Yeah, so it's just a matter of external rotation. You can start by just keeping your left foot to the floor, I believe. Let's see. So if you just came here and don't worry about the external rotation, and let yourself sit back on that right heel, or left heel, whatever side you're working on. Then from there, you can come into a supported, let me turn this way so you can see better. You can come into a supported version with one of your blocks.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that
Or
works.
even take it to low height if that's okay for you. And then you can come forward, you can place opposite hand to foot and keep one hand behind you to stay anchored. So you may feel the stretch in inner thigh, but it can also be outer hip and outer glutes.
Okay. Yeah, that works.
Does that work out okay for you or better?
Yeah, it works better to have it supported. So
Yeah.
thank you.
And it doesn't have to be supported, but it also doesn't have to be down on the floor. The goal is to create a positive sensation, right? A pleasurable sensation, not to get your shin down the floor. So, for me, I do have quite a bit of external rotation, but you see my knee is off the floor here. It's not coming all the way down. Now, I could bring it down, but then I'd be compromising. I'll show you what that looks like from the front. If it came all the way down, then now I'm laying on my left butt cheek. And my right hip is all up in the air. It's totally wonky. So it's about keeping your pelvis level and creating a positive sensation. Now, this may not be your favorite hip opener. Fine. I don't like that term. No one wants their hips open. We want them stable, but it may not be your favorite stretch. It's just a variation on a pigeon prep is what it is. So, I can't please myself with every pose all the time. Same goes for you, right? And so maybe this isn't your winner, and that's okay.
I just don't have good external rotation in my hips.
And many people don't.
That is
and our internal rotation is even worse, right?
It is.
So, it's something we work on.
Okay.
And
And your value as a human is not quantified by your lack of hip rotation. That's the bottom line right there. So if the rest of you are still sitting on your right heel, you're probably welcome coming out of this posture promptly. So go ahead and come out. Let's see, where were we? Did I address it okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I
So
think
we're gonna make our way back to a lunge with the right foot forward. And we're gonna come into that crescent lunge variation with a little bend in the knee. We're gonna take both hands to the tops of the shoulders. Actually, no, we're not. Cactus arms. Yeah, back that up. Cactus arms. And we actually have left foot forward, don't we? Left foot forward. Sometimes detours really throw me off track. And then cactus arms, strong to that left foot, step your right foot forward, keep your cactus arms. And then I want you to hug your elbows down towards your waist or hips. Now the hug comes from the outer armpits. And then once they're there, hinge forward. And now straighten your elbows. Palms are facing down, biceps are facing down because we're in an external rotation. I want the work to come from your upper arm muscles in the back of your upper arms and in your outer armpits, not your lower back. Now, might you feel your lower back? Sure. But I don't want that to be the overriding sensation. We're going to keep all of this, start to get a little more upright in the upper body, and start to bring the palms forward. Biceps are still facing the same orientation, so now they're facing the ceiling or the wall behind you. And hands to the floor. You can go straight into down dog or child's pose, or move through your plank chaturanga sequence first. We have about 5 to 6 minutes of practice stuff to go that I have planned. And if you guys can stay an extra 5 minutes, awesome. And if you can't, totally understand. So I'm going to carry on for those who can. We are going to be meeting on our bellies. So just come to lie down on your belly. We're going to put some more of those actions together. So we're going to set up just like we would for a Cobra Pose, starting with our glutes, anchoring from glutes down through hamstrings, reaching out to the toes. But I want you to keep your legs down and nice and heavy as you reach through the toes. So long in the backs of your legs. And then we're going to hug elbows towards hips or waist, just like we did. Try to keep your hands off the floor. And now straighten your arms. So biceps are facing the floor. We're engaging those mid and lower traps, but not necessarily relying on the muscles of the lower back. And now just reach the crown of your head forward. And see if you can peel your sternum away from the floor. So your breastbone. Couple rounds of breath here. And now see if you can take your gaze forward just a bit. And we'll lower down. You can stack your hands underneath your forehead. Wag your hips from side to side. Couple rounds of resting breath. To come up, we're going to place hands to the floor. Find that hug of the outer armpit to set your shoulder blades so that the rounded parts of your shoulders are not caving in towards the floor or towards each other. Instead, they're away from the floor. And we'll push through our hands, pushing the floor away to come up to tabletop And then we're gonna come to a seated position. I hope you guys can see me okay. It's getting really dark outside. It feels like evening in here. I've got my lamp on, but it's just not quite enough today. So we're gonna be working toward camel pose, Ustrasana. And we're gonna come into it in a way that is new to me, because I like to try new things. And it feels good in my body. That doesn't mean you're gonna love it. Just like with that external hip rotator. Just because one person likes it doesn't mean someone else will. But it's good to try new approaches and new routes of meeting a destination, right? So we're gonna be working towards camel pose. And what I like about it is that with this method, it really creates an opportunity for you to be honest with yourself. And it's not about getting fancy with our back bend. It's about staying controlled in our bodies while still finding a little bit of that spinal extension. So when you say the word extension in your mind, this is a rhetorical question you don't have to answer out loud, but what do you think of? What does it mean to you? So for me, extension doesn't mean a rainbow shape. If someone just said extension, that's not what I would picture, right? That's a super back bendy shape. That's not what I picture. When someone says extension, I picture length, right? Long, elongation, space between each vertebra. So that's gonna be what we're going for while maintaining control and strength in the foundation. So we're gonna start with tops of the feet flat, like we've been practicing a number of times today. And you're gonna come up to what I call high knees, okay? High knees. We're gonna be incorporating every single thing we've been working on. So relaxing in your upper belly. So not gripping there. Should be relatively soft. However, we do want some control in the lower belly, right? So that we can control the relationship between our pelvis and our rib cage, maintaining stability for the lower spine, because we're not trying to get super back bendy in the lower spine. So we're gonna hug hip bones a little closer to ribs. The hug comes from those low belly muscles, not from the hip flexors, okay? If you notice that your thighs are still straight down, we're actually not in hip flexion. So we don't want those to be taking charge of this situation. And you might already be feeling your glutes and hamstrings a little bit. If you think back, it seems so long ago, right? To the beginning of our practice, when we worked on those bridge pose variations, we're in the same shape now, we've just taken it upright. So hugging from glutes down through hamstrings, really anchoring down towards the floor. And now we're going to bring the quads on board, because yes, quads are still important, right? So we're going to keep all that. And I want you to come into hip flexion, starting to hinge at your hips and just let yourself sit down toward your heels. And then we're going to keep all of that and come back up. So sweet Jeebus, the quads, right? So we want to keep the quads on board without losing what's happening on the opposite side. Let's bring the arms into it. So we're going to externally rotate. We're not thrusting the ribs. It's just a rotation of the arm bones in the socket. And we're going to hinge at the hips. And then we'll come back up. Okay? So that might be your work there. If you want to take it to the next step, we're going to find that hip hinge. We're not going to come all the way down. Come about halfway down until we can find the heels of the feet. Hands to the heels of the feet. External rotation, biceps forward. So maybe this is your posture. Or we can start to reach through those quads. Glutes are still on board, guys. And we extend the upper spine. Now, we don't have to come all the way into that upright shape with the quads. Once we're here with hands to heels, maybe we just reach the sternum up a little bit. Maybe we then come forward a little bit, as long as we can maintain that engagement in the glutes and hamstrings. And then to come out, I like to reverse it and sit back down instead of pulling the body forward into that upright position. Try it a couple of times, see what you think. If you have questions, you can ask questions. This is our last, thing on the agenda, and then we're gonna wind down and close out our practice. But
okay, here's my question. So
okay.
I naturally can make that, my body naturally makes that shape.
Yes.
But I want to try to do it with control.
Right.
So while I'm doing it, am I also trying to knit? So I'm not opening that. So even though my lower back is participating, don't let all that go. Keep this knitting in while
Right.
Okay.
Because your lower back, of course, is going to, you're going to go into spinal extension of the lower back. We call it extension because it's extending the front part of the spine that faces your belly button. So, it's going to bend, right? Or curve, because that's anatomical reality, right? But what we don't want is for those muscles that line the lower spine to be hugging the body into that position.
Okay.
And so in order to turn them off and to stay stable in the pelvis, we want to keep that stable relationship. Remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the canister of your middle. And so if we have, crimped that soda can in the back too much, then everything's going to pop forward here, right? It's a lot of work for those lower spinal muscles, the paraspinals there, and complete disengagement in the front body. So you want to know why your back bends feel great, but then the next day your back is killing you, or maybe you've had back pain for 3 years. But I keep going to yoga. Everyone says go to yoga for back pain. This may be one reason. This could be a piece of the puzzle. So we want to stay strong in the legs, not just the quads, but see your hamstrings and glutes actually pull the back of your pelvis down. Think of them as like the pulley system, hugging down, okay? So when they hug the back of the pelvis down, then the front of the pelvis tilts up, right? That's just physics, right? It's like one side goes down, the other side of the bowl tilts up. So you naturally get that hip bones to ribs reset, right? Just by engaging this. Since the glutes and hamstrings hug down, the quads hug up.
You know what, I
Just
did it that way, and it helped. And what it also did that was different is normally I'm like, I don't know what to do with my neck. Like, I feel like it's being compressed, but that allowed me to have some space here for my neck.
Nice.
Which is new. Thank you.
Yes. And you don't have to throw your head back. You can, but you don't have to, like we mentioned earlier, we're after pleasurable sensation, not only during the practice, during the pose, during the transition, but later, right? So sometimes we think we're experiencing pleasurable sensations during our practice, and pleasurable sensations can be challenging, but then later, not so much, right? So then we have to start, like looking at all the pieces of the puzzle, right? But yeah, like I said, you can take your chin up and get that length in the front of the neck, right? Going for extension in the back of the neck. Don't have to, right? That's not going to be right for everyone today. You can keep your head in line with your upper spine. Not a problem. Any other comments? Okay.
Quads are tired.
Yes. And yes, because we're using them in a way that we don't normally use them.
Yes.
And we're trying to cultivate the actions that they are meant to do, right? Which is lift up. When you run, lift up, right? That's the quads and the hip flexors. But what else do you do when you run? Right? You press back, right? So that's your hamstrings and glutes. Anyway, when we run, we tend to get real good at that lifting up, but it's a different action as when you're stable on the floor and not in motion, right? So the lower quads specifically could get really tired. Maybe the upper quads are getting tired, your lower quads are fine. Just like with your hamstrings, you have different sections of those muscles.
Yeah. It's my lower, woohoo, party.
All right, so that's our camel for today. We're gonna come to a seated position and we're gonna get one more opportunity to practice that external rotation. So just place your right shin to the floor and your left shin in front to start. And you might notice a little bit of rounding in your spine. That's okay, because you are in hip flexion. Your left hip is flexed, so spinal rounding comes along with that. It's not a problem. And then we're gonna either just place the left shin in front or on top, either way. On top isn't better, just different, slightly. And you can stay upright or you can bow forward. Bowing forward is not better, just different. Now, if you're like me and you have cultivated throughout your lifetime, and it's part anatomical reality, just the way my body is, a lot of external rotation, and you bow forward, you're like, there's a saying that if you can do lotus pose, which is a very similar shape to this, then you don't need to practice it. You maxed out there. Right? You got it, move along. So if you're already in a lot of external rotation and we keep trying to deepen the sensations, there's only so much range of motion that's within our like natural limits, okay? So if we're bowing forward to get more out of that outer hip sensation, and we're already in a 180-degree external rotation, then that means the more is going to come from somewhere else, which may not be what you want. So I'm putting that out there. Second side. Maybe it's coming from the stabilizers in your hip joints. Ooh, we don't want that. We want them really strong, right? Maybe it's coming from the stabilizers that support your SI joints, your sacrum. We also want those really strong. So,
Oh boy,
where is it coming from?
talking to me. I feel like you're talking to me very specifically here.
I could be talking to a lot of people specifically. Right. This is a common thing, right? So, if you're in the stacked variation and your top shin lays perfectly on top of the bottom shin and your top knee is touching your bottom foot, then you are in a maximum passive external rotation. Okay, couple more breaths here. So we went more than 5 minutes over, and I apologize. Thank you for staying with me. It's the prep work, it's so important to me. And all that stuff we did with the blocks at the beginning, it took longer than I planned, but I wasn't gonna let that go. It's like properly painting a house. If you don't prep, your paint job might look good for a few weeks or months, but then you realize, oh no, it's no good. Proper prep is important. All right, you can come out of that on your second side, and if you prefer to stay in a seated position, we're gonna take just about 1 minute. You can always stay longer, but 1 minute together in a meditation, Shavasana time, and that can be done seated or laying down. If you're seated, you can use a prop or a piece of furniture for support. If you're lying down, that can be on your back or your side. And I will walk you through it and close us out. If you want to stay longer, just ignore the sound of my voice and you can stay as long as you like. Once you find a position that is comfortable for you, just like we did at the beginning of our practice, I want you to draw your attention to your body and notice which parts of your body are in contact with the floor. If you're lying down, you'll be focusing on your back body. And if you're seated, it will be your pelvis, perhaps your thigh bones or shin bones. And let's make all of those points of contact intentional. Allow the floor to absorb the weight of your body. And knowing you have that support, you can soften your breath a bit. Soften the muscles of your face and jaw. As your mind wanders, it's okay to notice those distractions and then just welcome your mind back to your breath and your body. You're welcome to stay as long as you like, but if it's time for you to move on, transitioning into the rest of your day or evening, and you're laying down, go ahead and rebend your knees, making your way to a seated position. And once you find your seat, join your palms together, bring them to the base of your sternum. Thank you for sharing your time with me today, for exploring these postures and actions in our bodies together. Choosing the practice of yoga. Namaste.